There's our moderator back.
Me?
Yeah, you.
I'm the moderator.
Well, whatever you want to call it. Facilitator, moderator.
Instigate.
Like instigator.
Instigator, that's a good one.
Yeah.
And she definitely is that.
That's what my kindergarten teacher said.
Yeah, you're going to go call June.
I was one of those too.
Ah, yes. It said something about that on my second grade report card.
Mm.
And with that and a simple prayer of gratitude for this gathering, we are begun.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for joining the instigators and rebels and whatever else.
Hello, Swayam.
Poet lovers.
Brother Shankara, hello everybody.
Hi.
Hi.
So, I'm wondering if anybody has brought a poem from the book that they wanted to share tonight first.
If nobody else volunteers, I'll be happy to.
Okay, that's great.
I have been, first of all, thank you, Brother Shankara, for suggesting this book. It is just, I don't have words. And I started reading Kabir's section. Growing up in India, we've all read Kabir's couplets in Hindi, and it was a different experience to read some of his poems with an English translation. If I can, I would like to read the introduction part of the poem. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
The introduction about Kabir before I read the poem.
Yeah.
Let me just, get to that page. Of course, as always, this Kindle. I thought if I just click on Kabir's name, it'll go back to the first page, but it's not doing that. And okay, now I got it. For 500 years, the poems of Kabir from 1440 to 1518 have been recited and sung throughout India. Kabir was a great religious reformer in his time, as well as a famous artist and musician, founding a sect that still claims to have million followers. Kabir achieved a remarkable synthesis of Hindu, Muslim, and even Christian belief. Rabindranath Tagore, the famous Bengali poet and novelist who won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913, was a major force in bringing the wonderful poems of Kabir to the attention of the West when he published some translations of Kabir in 1915. Some present-day readers of Kabir liken him to something of a tough guy, a Zen bruiser, a divine smart aleck. And there are many dimensions of this great master that one can bring to light, including his rarely revealed tenderness and his delicious, freeing humor. All of Kabir's poems were probably originally songs. One of the many legends surrounding his life may be true. He chose not to read or write, as this rendering leads one to think, and here's one poem: paper would turn to flame if I touched it in an ecstatic mood, and ink dries if it comes 100 feet within the radiance of one who will not let God leave their arms. Why trouble a pen to labor? I have got naked angels camping on my floors with nothing more to do than imprint my words upon the sky when I sing them. Having mentioned the fate of paper when I'm in love, and I'm always in love, how could a son like me ever appear dressed? Sounds like an interesting mystery that can help the bored pass some time. Kabir was born in Varanasi, North India, into a family of weavers who had recently converted to Islam, although it's widely believed that he was a disciple of a famous Hindu guru, Ramananda. While a family man and a weaver, Kabir passionately sought to show the way out of delusion, including the delusion of religious identity. During his lifetime, both mainstream Hindus and Muslims denounced him, only coming to claim and revere him as their own after his death. Kabir was well aware of the misunderstanding of the public toward a true mystic. This is reflected in the unique irony that pervades his poetry. Even so, there can be discovered a remarkable compassion and tenderness in his verse as portrayed in No Harm Done. Kabir's life both exemplifies and parallels all the saints in this book, as well as any living master. That is, the saints will usually create or allow controversy about themselves that serves as a kind of watchdog to keep the world at an arm's distance. The people who can get close to such a saint have to go through an ego dying process. It is a and this is, I like this next sentence. It is a paradoxical spiritual truth. The closer a teacher is to God, the harder they are to have faith in and or live around. While the less advanced teacher is, while the less advanced the teacher is, the more they can be easily accepted by the average person. Kabir, even when he had many wealthy followers, chose to live in a very small, rundown house in a rough section of town where people were afraid to venture at night. It was the same area where butchers had their shops, where the dying shrieks of animals confronted all ears, and where the stench of slaughtered animals could become unbearable in summer months. The circumstances Kabir lived in were especially challenging to some of his Hindu disciples who were strict vegetarians. Where he chose to live would probably have kept many of his present day readers so at odds with their spiritual standards that they would not even visit Kabir if he were alive today. My point being that what we see of historic saints is often tremendously edited, as the way a parent might edit what their child hears and sees. Christianity as a whole at times strikes me as a remarkably edited view of God, as do the beliefs of any religion that promotes any kind of division between soul and creation. But how wonderful such views exist to help the spiritually young grow. The problem, though, becomes we begin to want God on our terms, not His. The problem, though, becomes we begin to want God on our terms, not His. And our conditional terms will probably always keep us separate from the one we say we love and the one we need to unite with. What an irony. With so much religious propaganda playing havoc with us, when I felt it was legitimate, I have tried to fill in some of the blanks, unedit light's freedom, and not weaken the sweet divine punches like this playful, witty one. Again, when Kabir says, the fish in the water that is thirsty needs serious professional counseling. That is the introduction part, and the poem I was going to read is actually quite small, and it is titled A Man with Amnesia. With a begging bowl in hand, a man with amnesia knocks on his own door. With a begging bowl in hand, a man with amnesia knocks on his own door. My guru cured me of that profound illness. God asking God for forgiveness or alms. God asking God for forgiveness or alms. That's it. It's a beautiful poem, sums up almost the whole of a lot of Vedanta philosophy.
Yes, indeed. Beautiful. Thank you, Swayam.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that poem in our book?
Yes, it is.
Which
It is.
page?
In my version on Kindle, it is page 216, 216.
Page 216.
Uh-huh.
It's titled A Man with Amnesia.
Yeah.
His couplets in Hindi are so meaningful. It's not even the word, but with full of, the first line is a simile and then the second line has a message. And they are sung by so many people and it's just very soul pleasing to hear his couplets, read as well as hear them sung.
It's interesting that he says, and these saints don't exaggerate or hyperbolize. He says that paper would burst into flame if he touched it when he was in his spiritual state. What a remarkable thing to say.
Do you know if, I mean, I know he says in that the naked angels were imprinting his words on the, was it the sky, the clouds or something?
Sky.
Sky, so he could read them when he was singing. But who actually took these down if he didn't write them down? Did somebody, do you know anything about that? Anybody?
Good question, actually. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, it mentions that he had many followers. No doubt many of them were writing them down since he would sing them.
Mhm. Yeah.
I guess that sort of like so many of the ancient scriptures too, I think.
Does anybody else want to say something about this one or read a poem?
I have a poem whenever we're ready to move to another poem, but if somebody wants to talk about this one, I don't want to move into that. I mean, I don't want to.
We can also move around if, I know for me, when I read or hear these poems, even after several times, something might come to me, 10, 15 minutes later. So we can always come back if something hits you about this poem. I'm also wondering if it would be helpful if we could have it in front of us. I don't know. I may figure out how to do that for next time. But,
Well, I think it's interesting, this business of amnesia, a man with amnesia. This is being a person in the state of spiritual ignorance. It's Saint Teresa of Avila says, it's only in us that God becomes so confused that he asks questions. It is only in us that God becomes so confused that he asks questions. So this business of creating manyness, I am one, I shall become many. This manyness is a delusion for the created as well as the creator. For the creator as well as the created. both of those poems, Saint Teresa of Avila's and this one that Swayam just read, point to that.
I'd like to read another Kabir poem that seems along the same lines, that just tickles me. But we'll see if y'all think it it is along the same lines. It's got a bad word in it though, so watch out. Okay, it's called "Hit the Fan."
What page is it on?
On
Yeah.
my Kindle, it's 223.
Yep.
Okay, hit the fan. When God says to God, "Where are you?" Watch out, duck, for the shit is going to hit the fan.
Hmm.
Yeah, these saints aren't shy about being plain spoken. Sri Ramakrishna was also very plain spoken in that way sometimes.
It relates to that amnesia in the first poem about, a man with amnesia and, God. Anyway, here's God having amnesia, sort of. I don't even know. I just love it. I think it's really fun.
Yeah. It's interesting in so how few words so much profound message comes out.
Yeah.
So, what does that mean when God says to God, "Where are you?"
Well, isn't that our primordial condition of seeming to be separate? That's we reach towards something. We say, "Where's that something?" In that's how I hear it anyway.
Yeah.
That's that aching sense of separation.
Good connection, Cindy, between the amnesia poem and this one.
What was the one we read last week about that seemed to relate to this about, gosh, now it's just completely gone out of my head. Sorry. There was one that seemed to do that.
Well, a lot of these poems allude to this in one way or another, because each of these saints in their reaching out to us say, "I want to heal that condition. I want to dispel that ignorance. I want to."
I remember it. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, uh, it was the one that I read. It was the one, Every Prophet's Name,
Mm-hmm.
where she says, um, mm, only in us is God so lost that he asks questions. God asks, "Where are you?"
Yeah.
The soul outside all walls never troubles him, never wonders things like, "Where are you, beloved?" That's really interesting because that is Saint Teresa, right?
Yeah. That's I paraphrased but misquoted that earlier
Yeah.
in saying that it is only in us that God becomes so confused. But one of the other poets does actually say that,
You're right.
say those words.
Yeah, let me see if I can find that one. Oh, there it is. Uh, let's see. I think. You have never been lost. Who is this?
Oh,
Let's-
that's That's Meister Eckhart.
Ah, yes. Yes. Um, huh. Do you want me to read that one?
Sure.
You have never been lost, Meister Eckhart. I wanted to put something on this page that might make your heart see as mine. For the truth lives in me now. Its ways I know. When God flowed into himself, he made the mill happy. These words, light ground, hold them. Every world sends out its scouts, looking for a merchant who can say, "You have never been lost, dear. It is God who became confused." When he returns home, the mill will sing. Existence leans its mouth toward me because my love cares for it.
What page was that one on, Cindy?
102. Wait a minute, is that correct? I get confused here.
Yes, it's 102.
Okay.
It's interesting that Meister Eckhart became very influential during his lifetime. And as things were rocking along as he got older, the Inquisition began to move on him.
Mm.
And so he just died. He just up and died.
How smart of him.
Yes, exactly. And I suspect it was the same sort of death that Swami Vivekananda had. You know, just, all right, enough of this. I'm out of here.
These poets seem to be talking about the confused God inside of me.
Well,
How I perceive God is very confusing.
yes. I think all of us share that.
Mm.
You know, we have in our search for God, you know, oftentimes we build upon our childhood, whether it be Hindu or Christian or whatever, and then we go on a search and we touch on Buddhism and we touch on Baha'i and we touch on this and that, and it's very confusing inside.
Yes. Well, I pulled up another Meister Eckhart poem. If we're ready to read another poem, I'll be happy to read this one.
Read on.
Okay. The title of this is So Fragile as We Grow. So fragile as we grow. Someday you will hear all things applaud your wonder. Life claps in awe of the divine's performance. When your veil is removed, you, dear, you, everyone, will see that your being is holy. Raising their children is the primary care and purpose of some. This is a blessed state, for an oasis of love is found in the desert. The heart only reflects the sky when it is giving and compassionate. Who would want to stand before a mirror that was shattered and thus distorts our beauty that is so fragile as we grow? An oasis for all life the soul becomes when it is unveiled. An oasis for all life the soul becomes when it is unveiled. I don't know if all of you have had the opportunity to be in the desert and come upon an oasis. If you have, you will really understand this metaphor. Outside of Palm Springs, California, which is in a howling desert, there is such an oasis. And it is really remarkable to drive from Palm Springs through that desert and arrive at that oasis where there's running water and greenness and beauty. So when I read this, that really registered. An oasis for all life the soul becomes when it is unveiled.
I'm trying to see what he means by the heart only reflects the sky when it is giving and compassionate.
Well, the sky, you'll notice the word sky is capitalized, which means the divine. The sky in the sense I think that Gareth Young used it the other day when he gave that talk. Because then he said, he follows that with the metaphor of the shattered mirror. So a giving and compassionate heart, which is, if we remember, that's at the end of that Every Prophet's Name by Saint Teresa of Avila. The loving and compassionate heart, the giving and compassionate heart is the key to the divine. So.
And the mirrors we're standing in front of now are distorting.
Yes. Ultimately, according to what the great teachers and scriptures tell us, we set aside the mirror altogether, which is the mirror of the heart, the mind, both hemispheres of the mind. And it isn't that we are in the presence of, we then are that. It's no longer a reflection. It's not a duality. It's when the mirror of the heart mind, both sides of both hemispheres of the brain when that is set aside, it's, the scriptures put it this way, and we understand that Brahman means the Godhead, the inexpressible God. So the scripture says, the knower of Brahman becomes Brahman. The knower of the Godhead becomes the Godhead. So that's that sky.
I also find it interesting, the second verse, raising their children is the primary care and purpose of some. This is a blessed state, for an oasis of love is found in the desert. And it seems like he's saying basically the world is a desert, except for places where one might find unconditional love, which I think he's referring to here.
That's how I hear it too.
Talking about unconditional love that mothers have for children, I remember a friend of mine once was telling me that even if a child, like, I think she was telling a sort of a story that this son is disgruntled with his mother for some reason. So he goes to the grave and he kicks the tombstone, and a voice comes out, "Oh, I hope you didn't hurt your feet, my dear."
Aww.
Well, that would be a real mother.
Mm-hmm.
Or a loving God.
Or
Yes.
a loving God, yes.
Talking about loving God, and also I think earlier somebody had asked commented about how confused we become about, I guess, God or religion as we grow older. So I found this poem again in Kabir's collection, if I may read it. It says, "I would be glad. You are sitting in a wagon being drawn by a horse whose reins you hold. There are two inside of you who can steer. There are two inside of you who can steer. Though most never hand the reins to me, so they go from place to place the best they can, though rarely happy. And rarely does this whole body laugh, feeling God's poke in the ribs. If you feel tired, dear, my shoulder is soft. I'd be glad to steer a while." So I take it that God is ready. We are just not handing over the reins. So we go place to place and not find happiness um, and don't get tickled by God either.
Exactly. Yeah, we go from place to place in the desert. It seems it's only those people who look inside for happiness. And of course, that's spiritual aspirants, but it's also artists, musicians, great scientists, an Einstein, a Feynman, a Marie Curie. They're genuinely happy because they don't They don't wander around in the desert looking for happiness. They find their joy inside and their creativity inside. Creativity is one of the, just look around us. Creativity is one of the great attributes of the divine in manifestation. So when we participate in that, there's happiness. Jyoti, did you have something you wanted to read?
Yeah, I have that poem about the koans.
Yeah.
Would you tell them what koans are first,
Okay.
before, in case they don't know?
Yeah, this poet, who was?
Tukaram,
Oh, this is Tukaram.
on page 339.
Particularly in Zen Buddhism, there is a method of teaching called a koan. And the teacher asks a question. The most famous of them, of course, is, what is the sound of one hand clapping? There are many, many others. But Tukaram uses, whether he uses the word koan or whether Ladinksy interprets what he said, these puzzles that God puts forth. So anyway, I'll leave it. So that's what a koan. A koan is something that a spiritual teacher offers you as a way to defeat your left linear mind and come up with some insight that is beyond rationality. So here we go.
No one was cracking the koans. No one was cracking the koans he had tattooed everywhere. So God changed his tactics. He developed a sweet tooth and started chatting about love. He knew that really would not work, and sure enough, things got worse. For a fine, rebellious bunch we are. This time, people started stockpiling nukes, and lawsuits plagued the land, and smog put a full Nelson on our lungs. And TV hijacked brains, which caused millions to vote Republican. Wow. And all this because we couldn't bust a couple of koans. You want me to read it again?
Yeah,
please. No one was cracking the koans is the title. No one was cracking the koans he had tattooed everywhere. So God changed his tactics. He developed a sweet tooth and started chatting about love. He knew that really would not work, and sure enough, things got worse. For a fine, rebellious bunch we are. This time, people started stockpiling nukes, and lawsuits plagued the land, and smog put a full Nelson on our lungs, and TV hijacked brains, which caused millions to vote Republican. Wow. And all that because we couldn't bust a couple of koans. I just laughed out loud when I read that.
I love that one. And of course, this is Ladinksy taking poetic license, but I trust Ladinksy because I had been reading him long before I heard of this particular book with these translations and interpretation. I mean, these are of course not just translations; they're interpretations because we have these references to things that I'm sure Tukaram didn't know about unless he was psychic.
Right.
No, I'm sure he used metaphors that were appropriate to his time, but
Yeah.
probably would not be understandable in our time. So Ladinksy, as you say, interpreted them. That's the way I understand the way this book works.
Yeah.
When the metaphors and the language of a particular time wouldn't be understandable to us, then he finds metaphors that are understandable but communicate the same meaning.
Does the book anywhere reference the original poem?
What do you mean the original poem?
Like if this particular one was Ladinsky's version, does he mention where the original source from where he got it, and then
Yes, if you look in the back of the book, you will find his sources.
okay.
It won't mention this particular poem,
Oh,
but it will mention those sources from which he drew
okay.
these.
Yeah, I see a index page that says works consulted.
Yes.
It would be interesting to see for some of these a more literal translation to see to just as a comparison.
Well, the scholars have done those. Those are the sources that he used, as he explains in the introduction to the book. He used those sources. He did not himself translate anything.
Right.
He consulted the translations done by scholars and others, and then used his own deep insight to make these interpretations. And if they weren't so satisfying, they might be suspect. But since they are so satisfying, I think that I applaud him very much.
Shall we move on to another poem?
Sure.
Does anybody else have one?
I have one, Siddhi.
Okay, Haima.
There is one on, this is from Tukaram, page 350, certainty, that's it's called. Certainty undermines one's power and turns happiness into a long shot. Certainty confines. Dears, there's nothing in your life that will not change, especially all your ideas of God. Look what the insanity of righteous knowledge can do. Crusade and maim thousands in wanting to convert that which is already gold into gold. Certainty can become an illness that creates hate and greed. God once said to Tuka, even I'm ever changing, I'm ever beyond myself. What I may have once put my seal upon may no longer be the greatest truth.
I love this one, Haima.
Mm.
It's one of my faves.
Really liked it.
What is the first? What is it?
Certainty.
Certainty. That's the word that I wasn't understanding. Certainty. Yes, certainty is the enemy of.
That's what he says. Do you want me to read one more time?
Yes, please.
Certainty undermines one's power and turns happiness into a long shot. Certainty confines. Dears, there's nothing in your life that will not change, especially all your ideas of God. Look what the insanity of righteous knowledge can do. Crusade and maim thousands in wanting to convert that which is already gold into gold. Certainty can become an illness that creates hate and greed. God once said to God, even I am ever changing, I am ever beyond myself. What I may have once put my seal upon may no longer be the greatest truth.
That's big stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I use this book in a way. I've read through it several times just straight through, but now I tend to use it as when I'm pondering some spiritual question or aspect. I will just open the book to a random page, supposedly random. And I remember the first time I did that, and it was this poem, and I had been Beverly talking about confusion with these different paths, and finding really appealing things about each one, so we study them, but then it gets confusing. And I was feeling pretty frustrated, like there's a part of us that wants, we want certainty. We want to say, okay, this is my path. I'm going to grab onto this, and I'm to the exclusion of all the others. I'm going to settle down. And so that's how I was feeling, like I needed to do that. I needed to make some choice. And then this was the poem I opened up to. Like, and I laughed. I did. I was like, thank you very much.
Yeah. Ralph Waldo Emerson put it very bluntly. He used the word consistency rather than certainty, but he said, consistency is a hobgoblin of small minds. When we want certainty, we're definitely limiting ourselves and everything else. And that line that at the end of this poem, what I once put my seal upon may no longer be the greatest truth. That is very much a theme of Swami Vivekananda. Read the old book, sure. Beverly, you've done something that brings you up twice. There's your iPad and there's another one. And when you do, we get feedback. So that second one that you just turned on, if you could turn it off.
She's muted everything now.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So Vivekananda says, yeah, read the old books and imbibe the old books, but don't think that that's the end of everything, that there's much more to learn. And of course, it makes sense if we think that we're dealing with the infinite, the eternal. How could there be any end to what we can learn or know?
I guess this poem gives us permission to get confused.
Well, if we don't get confused, we're not awake. It seems to me anyway.
It's like that thing that says if you're not outraged you're not paying attention, which I never liked. But I feel like if you're not confused, you're not looking very hard.
Our left mind will eternally be confused because it wants to explain everything and it cannot. That which is absolute as it says in the Chandi about the Divine Mother, you are that which cannot be uttered specifically. You are that which cannot be uttered specifically. And this is, according to the Chandi, it is Brahma speaking to his mother. So the left mind is ever going to be confused.
I think when we remember how limited our minds really are, as far as, we're human beings and we're able to perceive things with our senses in a limited way. I was even thinking earlier today about the idea of seeing God. You know, have you seen God? The thing with Ramakrishna, and he says yes. Well, when we say, have you seen God, most of us are thinking about a visual image, something we see with our eyes. But while it's a wonderful sense to have when it works right, it's also very limited. It's something that we have for a purpose as human beings. But to see a visual image of God, there's so much more than that to God. Anyway, it just made me think about that.
Yes, we human beings love to amplify our senses. We have the Hubble telescope up in the sky, which can take these absolutely breathtaking pictures. They make us feel the presence of the divine, these pictures. But then we have these listening devices that are listening to the universe as well, amplifying our sense of hearing. We have even now a kind of instrument that feels the vibration of gravity waves. So we've even amplified our sense of touch, feeling. It's astounding. And then, of course, there's the radio wave telescopes that amplify our ability to perceive other kinds of vibration. We keep trying not to be confused by getting more and more information. That isn't what does it.
Which just confuses us more.
Right.
It's like the internet, too much information.
And grocery stores with too many choices of cereal.
Right.
Yeah.
It's God trying to confuse God.
Well, one can hardly believe that the divine doesn't know this confusion is going to happen when that moment occurs that is mentioned in the scriptures, where the divine presence says, I am one, I shall become many. So the moment Maya, the illusion, comes into it, again in the Devi Mahatmyam, the Chandi, it said, Mother is the great illusion, and she causes this universe to whirl about again and again within the dense darkness of the depths of attachment. Those are the very words of the Chandi. Mother, you cause this universe to whirl about again and again within the dense darkness of the depths of attachment. And attachment to the illusion is what confuses us.
That makes my head hurt.
Yeah. Well, the antidote is lines like this: an oasis for all life the soul becomes when it is unveiled. No more confusion, and a profusion of abundance and joy and satisfaction. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
also, when the confusion reigns supreme, hand over the reins to God.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's interesting that one time M, the writer of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, was mentioning some astronomical phenomenon to Sri Ramakrishna. And so Sri Ramakrishna said, well, show me how this works. You're telling me this, how does it work? And so M began to sketch out the solar system, drawing it in the dirt. In this place where they used to go, the Panchavati, this place where they would go to have their spiritual discussions and to meditate and so on. So he started to draw the solar system in the dirt. And after a few moments, Sri Ramakrishna said, oh, please stop, it makes my head hurt. The linear explanations are vexing to us. There's no two ways about it.
And he was all bhakta on the outside and didn't have time for that
Mm-hmm.
solar system stuff.
Yeah. June, are you still with us?
She is. I see.
Yes. Yes, I'm soaking it all up.
Well, good, dear.
I got the 2 books just an hour ago.
Oh, did you?
Yes. So I think I'll be up late tonight.
Good. Yeah, that's the spirit. Soak it up. Soak it up. When you say the 2 books, what do you mean, June?
I heard God laughing because I read
Oh,
that
you
at
got
yoga.
you got Hafiz's I Heard God Laughing also.
Yes,
Oh, wonderful.
yes.
Yeah, someone recently gave me a copy of that book.
Oh,
That's also Ladinsky's interpretations of those poems.
oh, okay. Oh, I can't wait.
Well, your enthusiasm, dear, is inspiring to us all.
And June, if you find one that you love, feel free to bring it next week.
Yes, I will, but I can't read.
Well, then just tell us and tell us which one and we'll read it.
That I would appreciate that, because to read, I have to go to my OCR,
Right,
which I would have to leave the computer.
right.
It yeah.
No, just tell us the one that you'd like read next week. If you find one that you'd like read, I'm sure Jyoti would be delighted to read it for you.
Okay.
Absolutely. I love to read a poem.
And we have both those books here. We have I Heard God Laughing and this book. So
Okay.
well, according to the clock here, it's 9 o'clock.
Wow.
Shall we?
An hour went by?
Well, I'm glad you feel that way about it, June. That's the way it should feel to us.
And I ordered the book a week ago Tuesday, and it hasn't come in yet. So I'm like June. I'll be reading all week once I get it.
All right, Heidi, we're looking forward to that. And again, if you find something that you particularly want to read next week, whether you feel comfortable reading it or not, just if you do, we'd love to have you read it, because when a person reads a poem, they bring themselves to their reading.
Right.
And,
Oh, sure. I'd be happy to read it. In fact, there was a short poem. I went online last Monday night after our discussion, and I looked up the book, and of course they let you, read a little bit of it.
Uh-huh.
That's a poem, if somebody could find it. It was very short, by Rabia. Okay, and I don't remember the name of it, but it was, if it's in chronological order, it was towards the front of the book. And I went to look it up again before tonight, and I couldn't find it. But
what is it about? Do you recall?
it made me laugh because I just cracked up when I read it. It was something about like they tried to do like art versus peeling potatoes. Okay.
Oh, yes.
I just like, forget the art or drawing or something like that. I tried.
Yes, she said I tried painting.
Here it is.
Yeah, Jyoti's got it. Let's hear it.
It's page 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
It helps putting my hands on a pot, on a broom, in a wash pail. I tried painting, but it was easier to fly slicing potatoes.
I love that one too.
Me too. What is the title?
Slicing potatoes.
The title is Slicing Potatoes.
Okay.
Read it again if you would, Jyoti.
This is a good way to close the meeting. It helps putting my hands on a pot, on a broom, in a wash pail. I tried painting, but it was easier to fly slicing potatoes.
And one of the reasons I really like that is because I've always had aspirations to like paint or draw, and that's just not my thing. But I have a degree in culinary arts, and so I love to cook, and it's relaxing for me, and I can relate so much. It's like, just give me that broom or that potato peeler and let me go to town. That's
Right.
that's my art. You know, that's my creativity. Like,
Well, there it is. You see, it is not. And this is Rabia. You talk about creative. She created a life out of what would have been for so many people an absolute ruin. She created a life of sainthood. And you're so right, Heidi. Our creativity is expressed in numberless different ways. We are infinite beings endowed with an infinite capacity for creativity because we are that. That's my sincere belief, is that we are the divine presence, and when we release it, as Rabia says, we fly.
but I could
If the word wing is mentioned once, wing and the idea of flight is mentioned one time in this book, it's mentioned 100 times by these 12 different poets, by these 12 different saints. The idea of flight and spreading the wings, and what does a wing, you don't have to tell a wing what it's for. So yes. Jai, 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 the divine presence. So anything else from anyone? I'm just saying that because otherwise I'll close with our ohms. Okay. Saint John the Divine calls that the sacred chord. Amen.
Can I put our picture on so I can wave?
Sure.
to 'em?
Thank you,
Good.
Brother.
Good night, everyone. Hi, Ma. So glad you're safely in your new home there in Denver. Yeah, get used to living at 8,000 feet. It's a little different.
It's beautiful. It's very nice in the mornings, cool, 60 degrees,
Oh, I'm sure. Yes.
60, 65, and it's really nice. And afternoons it gets very hot, and again nights it's cool. So that's how it is right now.
Well.
It's glad to see all of you.
Well, good to have you back with us. And,
Yes, me too. Thank you so much for having this.
and June, it just makes me so happy that you have these books and that you're going to stay up all night reading them. Yeah.
I just might.
All right, dear. Well,
Thank you so much.
until next week.
thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night. Good night.
My dear hearts,
Bye.
Good night, good night, good night.
much love.
Bye. Bye.
Until next week.
Good night, dear son.